What happens when secrets are exposed in the blink of an eye? Watch as a simple cafe encounter turns into a life-changing moment you won't believe. Don T missed this shocking twist that changes everything. It was an ordinary evening at the small, cozy cafe where I often found solace after long days of work. The air was thick with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of quiet conversations. I always loved coming here, a peaceful escape from the chaos of the outside world. It was on this night, however, that things would take an unexpected turn. As I sipped my cappuccino and scanned the room, my eyes met the waitress. She was a young woman, no older than 25, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and a faint smile on her lips. She always seemed kind, always quick with a friendly word or a polite nod. But that night, something was different. There was an intensity in her gaze, a flicker of urgency in her eyes. It made me pause mid-sip, wondering what was going on. Before I could process the thought, she glanced around quickly, ensuring no one was paying attention to us. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she leaned toward me, her breath warm against the air. "Hide quick and just watch," she said, her words chillingly calm, yet filled with a subtle fear. I froze, unsure if I'd heard her right. The words hung in the air, an invitation to something unknown. The cafe, which had felt so familiar, now seemed foreign. The once comforting hum of conversation felt distant. Muffled, I glanced around, expecting to see something, anything, that could explain why she was acting this way. But there was nothing obvious. No one else seemed to notice the change in the atmosphere. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was about to happen. In a split second, my instincts took over. I didn't question it. Didn't hesitate. I grabbed my jacket, slid off the stool, and quietly moved to a corner where I could see the rest of the cafe without being noticed. My heart pounded in my chest. The stillness around me made everything seem more surreal, and the seconds stretched out, heavy with anticipation. What was I about to witness? I settled into the corner, my back pressed against the cool, tiled wall, trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible. My eyes scanned the cafe, still trying to make sense of the waitress's strange request. Why had she asked me to hide? What was she trying to protect me from? The dim lighting of the cafe made the scene feel more like a shadowed secret. The air thick with tension I couldn't yet understand. A few moments passed, and then I saw him. A man, unfamiliar to me, entered the cafe with a purposeful stride. He was tall, sharply dressed in a dark suit that contrasted with the casual atmosphere of the place. His presence immediately altered the dynamic of the room. People seemed to shift uncomfortably in their seats, glancing at him, then quickly looking away. He wasn't just a customer. He was someone who commanded attention, someone out of place but entirely in control. I watched closely as the man approached a table near the back, where a woman was already seated. She was familiar, a regular I'd seen many times, a local businesswoman, always dressed in power suits and exuding an air of confidence. But today, she seemed different. There was a nervousness in her posture, a subtle unease in the way she shifted in her chair. She smiled, but it was forced, like she was trying to maintain an image that didn't fit the situation. The man sat down, and their conversation began. Hushed at first, but with an intensity that made me strain to hear. I couldn't catch the words, but their body language spoke volumes. The woman was tense, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as though trying to hold onto something she didn't want to let go. The man, however, was calm, his gestures controlled, but there was a glint in his eyes, a look that suggested this wasn't just a casual chat. Whatever they were discussing, it was serious, and it was something they didn't want anyone to overhear. As I continued to watch, I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a secret being passed between them, something I wasn't supposed to see. I couldn't tear my eyes away, the sense of being an unwitting witness to something important weighing heavily on me. The minutes seemed to stretch into an eternity as I remained hidden in the corner, my eyes fixed on the pair at the table. My mind raced with 100 questions, but no answers came. The silence around me was overwhelming, broken only by the soft clinking of cups and the occasional murmur of distant conversations. The cafe, which had once been a place of comfort, now felt foreign, as though the walls themselves were watching, waiting for something to unfold. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the woman and the man. They weren't speaking loudly, but their body language was enough to tell me that this conversation held weight. The woman's face was etched with anxiety, and I could see her fingers tapping nervously on the table, betraying her calm exterior. She was trying to hide it, but the tension was palpable. The man, on the other hand, was calm, almost too calm. His eyes were sharp, calculating, as though he was in complete control of the situation. It was as if he had been in situations like this before, where silence spoke louder than words. I shifted slightly, trying to get a better view of what was happening, but I made sure not to draw attention to myself. My heart was racing, my breath shallow. The weight of the moment was starting to settle in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was witnessing something I shouldn't have. A cold sweat formed on the back of my neck. Every glance they exchanged, every subtle movement felt like a clue, but I couldn't quite put it all together. The woman's face shifted from nervousness to something darker, a flicker of fear crossing her features before she quickly masked it with a forced smile. The man's eyes didn't leave hers, and I could see him leaning in closer, his voice dropping even lower. Whatever they were talking about, it was no longer just business. It was personal, and it was dangerous. The quiet hum of the cafe faded as my own thoughts grew louder, the realization dawning on me that I was witnessing a turning point in their lives, one that would unravel in ways I couldn't yet understand. The calm before the storm had settled, and something was about to break. Just as I thought the tension couldn't build anymore, everything shifted in an instant. The man's calm demeanor, which had seemed so controlled, cracked. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly as he scanned the woman's face. There was a subtle but noticeable change in his posture, a shift that signaled this conversation was no longer about negotiation or pleasantries. It was about something deeper, something more significant. The woman, still trying to maintain her composure, leaned forward, her voice barely audible, but tinged with a mix of fear and desperation. She was pleading, trying to hold on to something, but I couldn't make out the words. Her hands, which had previously been trembling slightly, now gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. It was as if the weight of her situation had finally hit her, and she couldn't hide it anymore. Her mask was slipping. The man, however, remained eerily calm, but his gaze hardened. There was a coldness in his eyes now, one that sent a shiver down my spine. Whatever had been said in that low, frantic conversation was no longer in her control. The power dynamic had shifted. He had her in his grasp, and she knew it. The realization settled like a heavy cloud over me. This wasn't just a business meeting. This was a game of life and death, and she was losing. The atmosphere in the cafe, once so mundane, had become suffocating. I could feel my pulse racing, my heart pounding in my ears. The urgency in their interaction escalated as the man's voice dropped even lower. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I could see the woman's expression change from one of panic to reluctant acceptance. It was as if she had just understood the consequences of her actions, the point of no return. Suddenly, the man stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, breaking the tense silence that had settled over us. He gave her one last look, cold, calculating, before turning and walking away, leaving the woman frozen at the table, her face a mask of defeat. I was left there, in the corner, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on me. The calm facade had shattered, and whatever had just unfolded was about to set a series of events in motion that none of us could escape. The cafe fell silent after the man walked out, the stillness hanging in the air like a thick fog. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. The woman remained at the table, staring at the empty chair across from her, her hands now trembling visibly. She was no longer trying to hide her fear. It was written all over her face, a mixture of regret, dread, and something darker, like the weight of a decision she couldn't undo. Her shoulders slumped as if the very act of sitting there, alone, had drained her of all strength. I watched from the corner, my heart heavy with the realization that whatever I had just witnessed would change everything. The scene before me was no longer just a conversation between two people. It was a pivotal moment, one that would ripple through their lives, and perhaps even mine. The woman's struggle was palpable. She had lost control, and now she was left to face the consequences of a choice, or perhaps a betrayal, that had just been set in motion. She took a deep breath, gathering herself as best as she could, but there was no hiding from the truth. Her eyes darted around the room, as though she were looking for an escape, a way out of the trap she had fallen into. But there was no escape. Not anymore. The man's cold departure had sealed her fate. I had no idea what had transpired between them, but the weight of it was undeniable. The room itself felt heavier, as if the walls were closing in on her. I could see her hands now, clutched tightly around her phone, her fingers hovering over it but not quite dialing. She wanted to reach out, to call someone, but whom? What could she even say? And then, just as I thought she might break down entirely, she stood up, smoothing her clothes, and walked to the door with a steely determination. I couldn't tell if she was trying to hold onto her dignity, or if she was preparing to confront whatever came next. But one thing was clear. Her life had irrevocably changed in that instant, and nothing would ever be the same again. As she stepped outside, I was left alone in the cafe, the heavy weight of what I had witnessed still hanging in the air, knowing I had been part of a story that was far from over. Enjoying the drama. Don't miss out on more jaw-dropping stories. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. Bell subscribe now, stay tuned, don't miss out.